Hello. Today I'll be talking about the game The Warriors Come Out to Play. I had no idea this game existed on Amazon Prime Days earlier this week. I was just browsing and happened to see this game for like 14 bucks, and I remembered this movie from my youth, so I thought I'd buy it and see how it is. So let me do a setup and how to play, and then I'll give you some thoughts. So let's get started with setup. Alright, first thing you do is place the game board in the centering table within reach of all players, along with your bottle tokens, fight tokens, defeat tokens, and dice. You place the warrior gang leader figure on the 4 space of this reputation track. Then you just randomly place the other gang leader figures on the other spaces of the reputation track. Then each player will choose one of the warrior movers and place it on the Bronx start space. Just a quick comment, I don't know why they chose Mercy as a warrior mover and left off Ajax. Well, I read some dubious reasons for that, but she was definitely not a member of the Warriors, so just my opinion, that was nonsense. But we'll go ahead and take Swan, Cochise, and Vermin, because I'm going to set up for a 3-player game, so these other movers will just not be used. Then each player will get from this deck of warrior cards, they'll get the 4 cards that go with the mover that they chose. So in this case, one player will have the 4 Swan cards, one player will have the 4 Cochise cards, and one player will have the 4 Vermin cards. Also from the warrior deck, each player will take 3 throw hands cards, so they will have a starting hand of 7 cards. You'll then take the unchosen warrior cards from the warrior deck along with all the throw hand cards, shuffle those together and make one deck. This will be your war deck, and then you'll draw the top 3 cards and put them face up near the deck, like so. Each player then looks at their character's starting cards and looks at the weapon on those cards. So brass knuckles for Vermin, chain for Cochise, and switchblade for Swan. You'll then look in the weapon deck for those cards and give that one of those starting weapons to those players. Let me find a brass knuckles. Alright, so brass knuckles for Vermin, chain for Cochise, and switchblade for Swan. And they'll place that starting weapon face up in front of them. Again, these cards would be in the player's hands, but since I'm playing solo, I've got them set down here in front of me. You'll then shuffle the remaining weapon cards and again reveal the top 3. Like so. You then shuffle your bopper deck and just place it in a face down draw pile somewhere near the board. Set the Van Cortlandt Park and the Coney Island Showdown card location cards aside for the moment. Then shuffle the rest of your location tiles into a face down stack near the board. You then take that Van Cortlandt Park location tile you set aside and put it near your shuffled location stack. The first fight will begin at Van Cortlandt Park. Keep your Coney Island Showdown cards set aside for the final fight of the game. Then take your gang tiles, shuffle those up, and set them next to the location stack or above the location stack. And then you'll reveal the top gang, and that will be the first gang that you fight in Van Cortlandt Park. You take your fight tokens and place one on each of these X spaces on the board. And finally, you randomly choose a first player from among the players and give them the instigator token, and that's the first player marker. That's it. You're then set up and ready to start the game. Alright, so kind of an overview. If you've never seen this movie, a bunch of gangs were called together for a summit. The leader of the largest gang who was holding the summit is killed, and it's blamed on the Warriors even though they didn't really do it. So they spend the night trying to get back to their home turf of Coney Island from the Bronx, and they have to fight all the other gangs who are after them since they think they killed Cyrus, the leader of the Riffs. And so anyway, that's what this game is about. The Warriors trying to get back to Coney Island, fighting other gangs along the way, and then once they reach Coney Island, there'll be a final fight. And if you survive that, then the players win. Otherwise, the players lose. So it's cooperative. So the game is broken up into two phases, a fight phase and the city phase. The game begins with the fight phase, and you'll have to fight the gang that you drew at the beginning of the game in Van Cortlandt Park. To win a fight, you've got to cover both spots on the gang tile, as well as one spot for each warrior in play, so 3 spots on the location tile if you're playing with 3 players. And if the gang you're fighting is higher on the reputation track, which in this case the Turnbull ACs are this figure, so they are higher on the reputation track than the Warriors, who are on spot 4. So if that's the case, you have to cover one additional spot on the location tile, and it must be a reputation spot. So for this fight, the Warriors will have to cover the 2 spots on the gang tile and 4 spots on the location tile, one of them being the reputation spot. Players can participate in the fight as long as they are in the same area of the board, neighborhood of the board. It's broken up into 4 neighborhoods. You've got the Bronx, Uptown, Midtown, and Downtown. So as long as your player's mover is in the same neighborhood as where the fight is taking place, you participate. So at the beginning of the game, you're all starting in the Bronx. So in the first fight, all players can participate. But it may be as the game goes on that you kind of get separated, and you're in different neighborhoods. So if a player was not in the same neighborhood, they wouldn't be able to participate. The player with the instigator token will take the first turn in the fight phase, and you can play any number of cards from your hand or weapons that you have to cover one spot. So you can never cover more than one spot on a turn. And to cover a spot, you either have to roll dice equal to or higher than the number you want to cover, or you have to use a weapon to cover a spot that's got a weapon on it. It's like this is brass knuckles or chain, brass knuckles or switchblade, or brass or chain or a baseball bat. So let's take a look at the war cards. The top left shows how many dice you can roll. So if you played these 2 cards, you could roll 2 dice, or if you played this card, you could roll 2 dice, and then you could add this card and roll 3 dice. But you can never roll, no matter how many cards you play, you can never play more than 5 dice. Cards may also have a special power, like this one lets you could use your switchblade. If you play this card and use their switchblade, you could use it as any weapon, so you could cover any weapon spot instead of just the switchblade. This card here, take the lead. When another warrior in your neighborhood rolls, you may discard this card from your hand to add 1 to a die. So in that case, if it was another player's turn and they were rolling dice, you could discard this card, ignoring the dice effect there, and you would get to add 1, to change one of their dice by adding 1 point to it. And then this card is just, whenever you play a card from your hand, it's normally just discarded to a discard pile. Whenever you play a weapon, you just flip it over, and then that can't be used again that turn. You'll get to turn it over at the end of the fight. So the first player will take turns playing cards from his hand to cover one spot. So for example, this player could just turn over his weapon, and then you use these defeat tokens to cover spots. So he could turn over his weapon to cover this spot that says switchblade or brass knuckles, and then that's one of the spots covered on that location tile. Then it's the next player's turn, so he could play a card. Maybe he wants to play this card to roll 2 dice, and it also has this power: when this is played, you may re-roll 1 die after rolling. So he could play that, grab 2 dice, roll them. He got 4 and a 4. So he could cover either this 4 spot here, or he could cover one of these 3 spots here. So you can cover a spot that you roll equal to or lower. Now, one thing which you got to take into account is when any gang you're going to fight, you got to look at their power first. So before the fight, the instigator chooses a warrior in their neighborhood. That warrior discards a random card. So we should have done that, but I'm just kind of going over the rules, not actually playing the game yet. But you always have to look at whatever power is on the gang you're fighting before the fight takes place and do what it says. So players will take turns, again, rolling dice or using their weapons to cover spots. If you're ever not able to cover a spot, either because you can't or you just don't want to, then that player is knocked out, and that player has to choose a card from their hand to discard out of the game, not to their discard pile, but remove from the game. And if they don't have any cards in their hand, then they have to choose one from their discard pile to remove from the game. And then they're knocked out and can't continue to participate in the fight for the rest of that fight. If you do end up covering up all the spots on the gang and location tile that are required, then you win the fight. So the first thing you do is discard the defeat tokens from the gang tile. You then move that gang to the last space on the reputation track, shifting everybody else up. Then you would move that gang tile face up to the bottom of the gang cards and flip over the next one. If you go to reveal a new gang tile and they're all face up, then you just flip them upside down, shuffle them up, and start with a new gang tile. Let's put that back. You then remove all the defeat tokens from the location tile. If it's the Van Cortlandt Park location tile, then it's removed from the gang, and you just don't draw a new one at this point. But if it's any other tile than the Van Cortlandt Park, when you discard the defeat tokens from it, you place it at the face up at the bottom of the location stack. And then if you ever go to draw a new one from the location stack and they're all face up, then you just shuffle up the location tiles and put them face down again. But again, at the end of the fight, you do not draw a new location tile at that time. That'll happen later. If instead all the warrior players are knocked out before they are able to defeat the gang in the location tile, then the Warriors lose, and they shift one spot down on the reputation track, just swapping places with the gang lower than them. You would leave the gang tile where it is, just remove the any defeat tokens that were on it, but you'll still go ahead and remove any defeat tokens from the location tile and still discard that if it's the Van Cortlandt Park, or put it at the bottom of the location stack if it's any other location tile. But again, you will leave the gang tile. You'll have to fight them again. If the Warriors were on the 7th spot of the location track and they lose the fight and that moves them off the location track, then the players lose. If the Warriors didn't lose, and whether they won or lost the fight, then they can turn any of their weapon cards back face up. Any cards in their discard pile still remain in their discard pile. And then you go to the city phase. In the city phase, the players will take turns moving closer to Coney Island, starting with the player who has the instigator token. When you move, you can move to any space along the track as long as it takes you closer to Coney Island, as long as there's not another warrior figure on that space, as long as it does not take you. You can move into your neighborhood or the next neighborhood, but you can't skip a neighborhood, and you also can't pass a fight token. You have to stop on a fight token. Once that token is removed, once there's been a fight and that token is removed, then you can skip that space. You can't stop on a space with an X. So if you stop on a space that has this icon, you draw one of the war cards that's revealed and put it in your hand, and then you replace it in the row with the top card from the war deck. If you draw a card with this hand icon, now it may not be in this red symbol like that. There may be some like here where it's just in the brown circle. So if you land on a spot with the hand icon, then you draw a weapon card from one of the weapon cards from the revealed row, and then add that to your face up in front of you, and then replace it with the top card in the row from the draw deck. Now you can never have more than 2 weapons. If you draw a third weapon, then you have to discard one of the weapons you have, and the weapon you discard will be removed from the game. If you land on a spot with this icon, you can return any one card from your discard pile to your hand. If you land on the fight token, if you decide to stop on the fight token, remember you can't move past a fight token. So eventually somebody is going to have to land on that spot. Then you'll remove the fight token from the game and you'll be challenged to a fight. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but let's talk a little bit more about moving. If you land on one of these subway spaces, then nothing happens. You just land there and don't have to do anything else. And finally, the other thing you can do is just rest instead of moving. And if you rest, you get to return all the cards in your discard pile to your hand, but then you have to randomly remove one of those cards from your hand, and it's removed from the game. Okay, now, no matter which one of these spots you land on, if it's anything other than the subway or the fight, then you're going to have to draw bopper cards. Now, if it's one of these brown spaces, then you just have to draw one bopper card. If it's one of these threat spaces, then you'll have to draw 2 bopper cards, but you draw them one at a time. So if you draw one and it is a threat, in other words, it doesn't say the coast is clear, then you just keep it in your play area. You ignore the text. You don't have to do anything on the text until you draw your third bopper card that is a threat. When you draw your third threat, then you do read that text and do what it says, and then you're challenged to a fight. If you draw a coast is cleared card, then you just put it in the discard pile for the bopper cards. If you already have two threat bopper cards and you land on a space where you like this, where you've got to draw two bopper cards, like I said, you draw them one at a time. If you draw one and it's a threat and that's your third threat, then you won't end up drawing the second bopper card that you would normally end up drawing. But if it's a coast is clear, then you would have to draw one more. So you, again, if you draw your third and you still would normally have to draw another card, you just stop drawing because you go ahead and have to resolve that threat and then be challenged to a fight. Then you would, after you've fought your fight that you're challenged to, you would take your three threat cards along with any coast is cleared cards in the discard pile, shuffle them all back into the boppers deck, and that just forms a new boppers deck. So let's talk about being challenged to a fight. So there's two ways to be challenged to a fight. If you move your mover onto the fight token, then you're challenged to a fight, or if you draw your third bopper threat card, then you do whatever is on that threat card and then you're challenged to a fight. So those are the two ways you can be challenged. So whichever player is challenged to the fight, either because they landed on a fight token or because they drew their threat card, they will take the instigator token and put it in their play area. They'll then look at the top location tile of the deck, and they look at it secretly, and without communicating with the other warriors, they decide whether they want to fight or run. If they decide to fight, then they just go ahead and reveal the location tile, and then you have a fight phase like we talked about at the beginning of the game with the game that's revealed there. If you decide to run, then you would just put the location tile face up on the bottom of the stack. And again, if that makes all the tiles face up, then you would shuffle up the location tiles and push them face down again. And if you ran, you have to take one of the bottle tokens, place bottle token on the bottle token track here, and then the warrior figure must move down the reputation track a number of spaces equal to the number of bottle tokens on the track. Again, if the warrior's figure moves off the reputation track, then the players lose. And just want to mention one more time, if you land on a fight space or a subway space, you do not have to draw a bopper card. Of course, if you land on a fight space, then that's going to start a fight because you're challenged to a fight. If you land on the subway space, nothing happens and you do not draw a bopper card. Anyway, play will continue like this. If a player moves onto the Coney Island space, he does not draw a bopper card, and he does not take any more turns until all the warrior players have made it to the Coney Island space. When the last warrior reaches the Coney Island space, they will take the instigator token. Then they'll take the Coney Island showdown tile, place it here. You'll see which gang is number one on the reputation track. Place that gang, here. We'll say it's this guy. And then you'll have one final fight. And again, you got to cover the two spots on that gang, as well as one spot for each member of the Warriors, and one additional reputation spot for each gang that's higher than the Warriors on the reputation track. So in this case, there's 3 gangs higher than the Warriors. So that would be 3 reputation spots plus 3 for 3 warriors participating in the fight. So you'd have to cover 6 spots on here, 3 of them being reputation spots, and the 2 spots on the gang tile. If you win that fight, then the players win, and if all the players are knocked out before they win that fight, then the players lose. And that's how you play Warriors come out to play. So why don't we go ahead and set everything back up to how it was at the beginning of the game, and we'll go through some example turns. Alright, I think everything is set back up how it was at the beginning of the game. Alright, we got to start with the fight phase, fighting the Turnbull ACs at Van Cortlandt Park. The instigator, so the starting player is Swan here. Now again, we have to take this into effect. Before the fight, the instigator chooses a warrior in their neighborhood. That warrior discards a random card. We'll say he's going to choose Cochise, so he's got to discard a random card. Let me just kind of shuffle him up, and I'll say he's got to discard this one. But it's not out of the game, it's just discarded. So we'll put that face down. That'll be his discard pile. Alright, so that's done. Alright, now remember we got to cover both the spots on the gang, and then since we've got 3 people in the fight, 3 spots on the location, and because the Turnbull ACs are higher on the reputation track, 1 more spot, which is the reputation spot. So 4 spots on here, 1 being the reputation spot and 2 spots there. So he is going to go ahead and use his switchblade, and he will cover this spot here. So that's going to be his turn. Now we come on over here to Vermin. He'll use his brass knuckles, and so he will cover this spot here. So now we go to Cochise. He's going to go ahead and use his chain, and he will cover this spot here. So that's 2 of the 4 spots they need there. Alright, we're back to Swan. So he can play, and now we didn't talk much about these throw hands cards, but you can use them either to roll a dice, or you can play one from your hand. When you roll, you may discard this card from your hand, so you can't use it to roll and also use this power, but if you have another one in your hand, when you roll, you may discard this from your hand to add 1 to a die that you rolled, then remove this card from the game. So anyway, he's going to play this take the lead card to roll 2 dice. He's not going to use it for this power. So he's going to, we'll say he's played that, so that goes in his discard pile. He's rolling 2 dice. Got a 5 and a 2. So he's going to cover that 4 spot. So that takes care of the 2 spots on the gang tile. Alright, we're back to Vermin. He's going to play his smooth talker. So he'll discard, and this one lets him, when it's played, he can re-roll a die after rolling, and he gets to roll 2 dice, so we'll put that in his discard pile. So he's going to roll 2. Alright, he got a 6 and a 2, so he doesn't need to re-roll. He's going to cover that reputation spot. So to defeat this gang, we just need to cover 1 more spot, and hopefully Cochise can do that now. So now if he still had his chain, but he's already used it, if he had his chain, he could play this card and that chain to roll 2 dice. But he's already used that. He's just going to play 2 throw hands cards. So 1, 2. He's going to play 2 throw hand cards into his discard pile. Remember, he doesn't have to discard it from the game because he's not using it for this power. He's just using it to roll a dice. So he's going to roll 2 dice. And, Lord, 2 2s. So Swan over here, he's going to play his take the lead card. When another warrior in your neighborhood rolls, you may discard this from your hand to add 1 to a die. So he's going to play that to add 1 to one of his dies, which makes it a 3. And that allows him to go ahead and cover one of these spots on the location tile. And that's all we need to do. So now the warriors have won this fight. So we'll discard these defeat tokens, then we'll move the Turnbull ACs down to the bottom of the reputation track. Everybody else moves up one. Then we put these guys face up at the bottom of the gang and reveal the next gang, which is the punks. And then we go ahead and remove these defeat tokens from the location tile. And this Van Cortlandt Park location tile just gets removed from the game. We won't fight there again. And we don't, at this point, draw a new location card. Everybody can turn their weapon cards face up. So these are my discard piles. These are what's in the player's hands. And that's it for the fight phase. Now we go to the city phase. Swan player here still has the instigator, so he'll be first in the city phase. Alright, so Swan will take his mover, and he's going to move here, which lets him choose a card from his discard pile and add it to his hand. So they're both a Swan take the lead, so it doesn't matter which one. So he adds that one back to his hand. And now he's got to draw one Bopper card. So he got a threat card. It's his first one, so he just puts it in his play area. He doesn't have to do anything with it. Alright, so next is Vermin. He decides where he wants to go. And he can go anywhere, any of these spots, but he can't go where Swan is, and he can't go past the fight. He can stop on the fight. So he's just gonna stop right here, and that lets him take a warrior card or a war card of his choice. So he's gonna take this one, Snow. That adds it to his hand, and then he just reveals a new one. And because it's just a brown spot, he's got to draw one Bopper card. That's a Coast is Clear, so it just goes into the discard. Alright, now it's Cochise's turn. He's going to go ahead and move here. Lets him draw cards from this deck. So he'll take a Throw Hands card, put that in his hand of cards, and just draw a new one to replace. It's another Rembrandt. And now we're back to Swan's turn. Swan's going to go ahead and move here, which lets him take a card from the war. He will, let's see, what this one. When this is played, you may roll an additional die for each neighbor. Yeah, he'll take this Rembrandt card, put that in his hand, and we replace that. And now he's got to, oh, we forgot to have Cochise draw a Bopper card, but he got a Coast is Clear, and now Swan's got to draw a Bopper card, and he got a Coast is Clear. I may not have shuffled that very good. Alright, Vermin's turn again. He's going to move here, so that's going to let him return a card from his discard pile to his hand. He's only got one in his discard pile, which is that one, and now he has to draw a Bopper card. Oh, yeah, I must have really not shuffled that deck. I thought I did. I used this shuffler, but it must not have worked very good. Alright, well, we're going to end up getting a whole bunch of threat cards in a row, I think. Anyway, back to Cochise's turn. He can't move here, he can't move here, and he can't pass the fight, so the only thing he can do is go to the fight. So he's going to discard that fight token, and now we're challenged to a fight. So remember, he looks at the top location card without showing it to the other players, and he decides whether they want to run or fight. But remember, if you run, you got to move down the reputation track. So even though these numbers are kind of high, I think he says we're going to go ahead and fight. So he chooses to reveal it. He takes the instigator token. And so he will be first in the fight phase. Now we have to look where the punks are on the reputation track, and they are, no, that's the Furies. Let's see, the punks are these guys. So they're lower on the reputation track. So we don't have to do an extra space on here. So we got to cover the 2 spaces on the gang tile and then just any 3 spots on the location tile. But we do have to do their power. Before the fight, the instigator chooses a warrior in their neighborhood. That warrior discards 2 cards. Oh, man. All right. Well, everybody's still in the neighborhood. They're still all in the Bronx, so it's not random cards, so 2 cards of their choice. He's going to choose Vermin. So Vermin says he's going to discard 2 throw hands cards. So he puts those in his discard. All right. So we've done that power. So now Cochise takes the first turn. He's going to use his chain, so he flips that over and this card, so that lets him use his chain to roll 2 dice. So he's going to discard that card. Now he gets to roll 2 dice. He gets 2 4s, so he can cover either this 4 or one of these 4s. So he'll go ahead and cover a 4 up here on that gang. Alright, that's his turn. Now we move on to Swan's turn. Swan's going to use his Switchblade, and he's going to cover this one that's Brass Knuckles or Switchblade, so that takes care of the 2 spots on the gang card. So we still need our 3 spots here on the subway. Well, one of them happens to be Brass Knuckles, which Vermin has, and it's his turn, so he's going to use his Brass Knuckles, and we'll cover the Brass Knuckles spot. Now we're back to Cochise's turn. He's going to play his Intimidation, which lets him roll 2 dice. It would also, when this is played, you may roll an additional die for each threat card you have. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any threat cards, so he just gets his 2 dice, so he discards that. Rolls 2 dice. He got 2 4s, so he can cover one of those 4s on the location tile. So that's good. Back to Swan. I guess he'll play. He's going to play 2 throw hands cards to roll 2 dice. And luckily he got a 4, so that lets him cover this 4 spot, and that's all we need to defeat this game. So first we remove these 2. We move the punks down 1 on the reputation track, which that just moves them there. They get discarded and a new gang is revealed. The hi-hats. Now we can go ahead and remove all of these and put that face up at the bottom of the location stack, and we don't reveal a new one. And then everybody can turn their weapon card back face up. Now, just on a side note, I'm not sure why they chose the hi-hats as a gang for the warriors to fight in this game, because they were seen, briefly at the beginning of the movie, but the warriors never ran into them or fought them. So it kind of seems like maybe they should have put the orphans in here, which was kind of the first gang the warriors had any kind of scuffle with. But for some reason they're not in here and the hi-hats are. I don't know if maybe it's just because they look cooler or something. I'm not sure, but just wanted to mention that. So that would end the fight phase, and now we would go back to the city phase with the instigator being the first player. And now they can, because they've moved that fight token, they can move all the way to this fight token before they have to fight again, unless somebody gets their 3rd threat. I don't know. Let's just show a couple things. Let's say it's Cochise's turn. He wants to rest because he's down to just a few cards. So he's going to rest, so he doesn't move, but he puts all his cards in his discard pile back into his hand. But then he's got to remove a random card from his hand. So let me just kind of shuffle them up so I can remove a random one. We'll just say this one. And that gets removed from the game. Oh, man. That was not one I wanted to lose. All right. So he rested. Let's just say, just to show something different, Swan, he goes here and he gets to draw a weapon card. He'll take a baseball bat. So now he's got 2 weapons, one for each hand basically, and that's all the weapons he can have. He can draw another one in the future, but he'll have to remove one of his weapons from the game if he does that. We got to replace the one that was there, which is a switchblade. I do want to mention, let me just find real quick. One of the weapon cards in the game is the Molotov. If you have that weapon, it's like a wild. You can use it as any weapon, but like it says here, it's a one-time use. Once you use it, it's removed from the game. And then he has to draw a bopper card. So that's his second threat. Again, he doesn't have to do anything. You don't do anything until you get your third threat. So now it's Vermin's turn. So he could go here and draw one of these cards. Maybe he takes Fox here, who's got a power. When this is returned from your discard pile, look at the top card of the bopper deck. You may place it on the bottom. But anyway, that goes into his hand. Replace that. And now he does have to draw a bopper card. Coast is clear. And back to Cochise. I'm trying to think if there's anything I haven't really shown. Let's just say if somebody did get their third threat, we'll just show that. That's a coast is clear. This guy draws. Okay, he gets his third threat. So you would have to do it. This says, if this is your third threat, roll a die for each of the weapons, for each of your weapons. So he'd have to roll 2 dice because he's got 2 weapons. If you roll a 1 or 2, remove it from the game, and then challenge to a fight, which works like how we've seen before. So this is how you go, trying to make it across town until you get to Coney Island. Again, then you have the fight at Coney Island using this tile, and whichever gang is number 1 on the reputation track. So I think you kind of get a good idea of how the game plays. I think that's as much as I'm going to show. My thoughts on the game, I'm not sure. I played it once by myself, and as usual, I hate to make a judgment on a game that I haven't played with somebody else, but it's okay from the one play I've had playing it by myself. I'm certainly glad I didn't pay more than the $14 I paid on Amazon Prime for it. I think I've already mentioned a couple things as far as theming that I was disappointed in, and that they had Mercy as one of the warriors instead, and not Ajax, and that they had the Top Hats as a gang when they were never really fought. All the other ones, I think they really did fight in the movie. Well, they never actually fought the Turnbull ACs, but they did run from them. They did kind of a fight with the Lizzies, the Rogues. They never fought them, but they were the bad guys that actually did kill Cyrus, and they almost had a fight with them at the end, but they didn't quite. And the Furies, who they did fight. So I don't know, it seems like maybe they should have put the Orphans instead of the Top Hats. It's okay. That's all I can say after one play. If you watched this movie in the past and enjoyed it, then you might enjoy this game. I do want to mention, I did, after I played this game, I thought, well, I haven't seen that movie in God knows how long, so I went ahead and watched it yesterday, and I will say that it is not as good as I remembered from my youth. Um, Maybe that's just because I'm older now. I don't know, but it definitely was not as good as I had remembered it to be. But anyway, there you go. That's the Warriors come out to play. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.